hang on, give me one.
I'd like to call this Tuesday, February 4th, 2020 Board of Adjustments meeting to order. Brandy, roll call, please.
Hanson,
Here.
Brink,
Here.
Oletsky,
Present.
Culhane,
Here.
Dargits Johnson,
Here.
and Dolly, Stein, and Ford are absent. We do have a quorum.
Fantastic. It's my understanding that we're going to move agenda item 1 to the next hearing, correct?
Yes, yep, we'll strike that item.
Do we need a motion for that?
Yes.
Ask for motion to move the minutes.
I'll make that motion. Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Same sign. Motion passes. Item number 2 on the agenda is conditional use permit for Robert and Pamela Drake.
Okay, thank you, Liam. So before you is a conditional use application, and as Liam had said, Robert and Pamela Drake are the owner and applicant. And this address is for Stony Point Second Edition. That'd be what you guys would reference the most, as it does not have an actual physical address yet, as there hasn't been a building permit issued. So the applicant seeks approval to operate a facility with a restaurant, condo apartments with parking garages, rooftop event venue, beach bunkers, and swimming pool in the C2 local commercial district pursuant to section 212603 and the conditional use to comply with section 210202B7 A through H, the specific rules governing individual conditional uses. And as you guys are familiar with that, that's just the findings that you have to look at to approve this conditional use, which involve ingress and egress, off-street parking, loading areas, the effects on adjoining properties, refuse and service areas, utilities, screening and buffering, signage, exterior lighting, required yards and open space, and general compatibility. And then just to note too, on here we do have a reference to Chapter 1109 swimming pools, which actually isn't part of this application, as that isn't something that the Board of Adjustment governs in Chapter 11. We just look at Title 21. So what I can do, I'll pull up we can look at this site plan here, and other than that, I can take any questions, or if you want to open the public hearing right away and talk with the applicant.
Does anybody have any questions for Brandy before we open the public hearing?
So I guess just a question about the pool. So I mean, them wanting a pool or not wanting a pool, that has nothing to do with us, is what you're saying?
Right.
Okay.
And the only thing that Chapter 11 is stating there is that it has to be approved by the South Dakota Department of Health. And that's completely governed by a different ordinance. So it's just more of a information tidbit.
Anything else? With that, I'll open the public hearing. Is there anybody is the applicant or anybody on behalf of the applicant here to speak?
Mike Lawrence, representing Bob and Pamela Drake on this conditional use. Bob, you know, this story goes back quite a while, and I didn't get involved until probably 3 to 4 years ago. And this property has sat vacant, unused for that amount of time. It's a property that has city utilities on it. It is pegged from the master plan for the Lake Compesca master plan as a commercial mixed use district or use, not district, but that's where they pegged it for a use. I believe the commercial land or the land use plan also says that this should be a developed property as well. We're looking to get approval tonight for the apartment and the restaurant. I mean, that's a conditional use that we're asking. We're not asking for variances on anything else on the property. We are just strictly asking for a conditional use to allow apartments, which were, unanimously from this board and the city council added to the C2 very recently. as a use. There aren't very many other C2 places. You know, the lake has the most C2s. It's and that was discussed when we did bring up the C2 where they were, and they were at the lake. This is one of the projects that we had in mind when we asked you guys to look at that. I know that there's issues with access. As far as the access goes on this, we are looking to strictly come in from the south. Is a fire alarm going off? Should we get out of here? Yeah, okay, good. We are looking to come in from the south. Mr. Drake has acquired the land. Right now, there is a construction road there. We would be willing to bring that up to city standards, to bring that up there. And we could keep it as a private road until there was more development there. But we do want to, work with the staff to get that road approved going forward. But tonight we're strictly asking for the ability to have apartments and a restaurant. Questions or anything on the site plan?
So Mike, what you're saying is that you're not talking about the road right now from the south?
What we would like to do is have the ability to get that approved through engineering and through the staff. We would have to come back and preliminary plan this area, these two lots, as well as the road. But yeah, currently right now, what we're asking for you is to, and you can make it contingent on staff approving our road or us working on it. And I would recommend that the staff, city staff has to work with us, or doesn't have to, gets to work with us, and to come up with an answer. I mean, this is an area that, when you take people from out of town on a boat and you're driving around Compeska, one of the questions always is, why doesn't somebody do something with that? I mean, and it just looks barren there. The solution to that is to put something nice there. That's what we're going to want to do. Something to keep in mind, though, is we do have 20 other acres right behind here that we're going to come to this same board and ask for other things that we want to build there. So we're not going to do this one to the point where we wouldn't get to be allowed to do the other two. So I mean, that gives you some peace of mind. We want to put a nice project here. When you build on land that costs what this land does, you don't put something that's not nice.
So what you're saying is that when you start doing the construction of this project, you're going to have all of those trucks and stuff coming in from Dora Avenue? Or
No,
how
from
will
the
they
south.
access?
They will come in from the south.
So what, with Mike saying that we'll work with them, they actually have to work with us on getting a preliminary plan. That's in the development agreement right now for this platted property. So the property is platted and zoned, but we need to memorialize a preliminary plan for those two commercial lots and how they'll get access. So then at that point, then that'll be brought to the plan commission, and then we'll look at all of those things at that time. But so what the applicant is wanting with this conditional use before that is just to look into designing it and kind of looking at it cohesively, so that they know that if they are able to do apartments or whatnot, and that kind of changes the scope of their project.
Yeah, we don't want to design a road to a place where we can't build an apartment and a restaurant.
But they would go hand in hand together?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
We would.
That's my question.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we would like to, as soon as possible, try to get, and that goes along with this. With this, then we work on that road and we get the traffic onto the road from the south.
Mike, would you just explain, you talk about apartment building and then you talk also condo. Would you just explain that a little bit?
I would diverge that.
Yeah, so it's actually, so when we looked at this too, and we amended the ordinance and we put apartments as a conditional use, in our definitions, when you go to apartments, it says C dwelling unit, and then under dwelling unit, then it has all these different types of dwelling units, which condos is one. So when Jill prepared this, I think she just put that in here just in conversation, but they're defined separately, but they're all still like underneath dwelling unit, which that's what apartments refers to.
Yeah, our plan is to sell them. Obviously, if we can't sell them all, we would rent them short-term, long-term until we get them sold. But it's a huge project, and it's something that doesn't exist on our lake currently, but we have quite a few people that, probably a list of 20, 30 people that have interest in these. We had a big unveiling of our whole overview of the entire project at North Shore, and we had a lot of people that were interested in this, being that you can see the entire lake from this point.
With that plan, was there a number of units?
We have not designed the structure yet. We would rely on, like I said, we're not asking for a variance on that. We would design it to within city ordinance. And those are changed. That changes on demand too, because the way the ordinance is wrote, if you can have a whole bunch more 1-bedrooms, then you can have 4 bedrooms. So if our demand comes in and a whole bunch of people want 2 bedrooms versus 4 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms versus that goes on based on your lot size. And a lot of times when you're designing that, it actually comes down to parking. Comes down to where you can find the parking. And for a condo like this, that's going to be for the price that we want to sell it for. They're going to want underground parking. They're going to want covered parking. They're going to want, something that they can get to without going outside. So, I mean, it does kind of limit you there as well.
So are you planning to have each unit have 2 parking places underground? Or just
We would
one?
design it again, if we have 4 bedrooms versus 2 bedrooms, we would design it within the city standards, depending on demand and depending on what the architect comes up for a building design.
Mike, do you have an idea of how many units?
I
How
do.
many units? It's okay if you
Yeah.
don't have one.
No, I don't. Yep. Like I said, you don't spend the money to design it until you come. Then you're allowed to build it actually. So what I tell people a lot of times when you're looking at this, you could look at 1 or 2 Willow Creek, which is over kind of on 19th there on Kemp Avenue. I think Crestone just built. It'd be a very similar to that. It's kind of a residential look with the parking garage underneath. Kemp Place.
So, Chip, did you have input then on when you asked about the units and the fire protection? Do you want
I was
have-
yeah, sure. I was just looking at the fire code book and talking about units, and we can work with that after, after we get your approval to use the land like you want to, and then what we'll go with is, because if you sprinkle it, you don't need 2 accesses. It just depends how many units. You can go to so many units where you need 2 access. When you sprinkle it, it helps out the situation quite a bit for the developer.
And we plan on sprinkling. Obviously, the building code makes us sprinkle. Our goal here is to, like I said, get the traffic off of the easement road. The only time that would ever come into play if there was some sort of an emergency that they couldn't get through on the other property. We're going to have a road that's paved, that's wide, that we work with the city on coming. A fire truck is probably more than likely every time going to take that road than the easement. The people that live on there currently up there, there's houses. They're more than likely going to use that road as well. I mean, it kind of cleans up the situation. Like I said, there's in the history of this land, there's kind of a black eye, and if you don't change that black eye, if you don't adapt the situation and change it, it just sits there and is still a black eye.
Any other questions for Mike? I think I preemptively opened the public meeting, but just to remind everybody, the public meeting is open. So if anybody is here to speak for or against, please come up, state your name, and give us a brief overview.
Do you want to set a time limit? I don't know how many people are here.
It doesn't look like there's going to be a problem. I mean, but if it gets to be too long, I might ask that we limit the time. Conda, do you want to speak?
Hello, Conda Williams. I'm sorry, I'm a black eye. My family has been on the property of Stony Point for many years. I object to this presentation, this proposal, as it is given to you and is laid out in these plans. I don't feel that it is appropriate for that area. I don't approve of a restaurant in my backyard. I strive to do the best that I can for our community, and I'm hoping that you'll make sure that things are done correctly, and when they bring a proposal that is adequate, that has the I's dotted and the T's crossed, that maybe you can approve of it. At this point and at this juncture, I don't feel that they are doing their due diligence as far as the quality of their proposal to Kempesca. I keep hearing that the citizens want this. I keep hearing that many people in our community want it. I don't know how much of this the people in the community want. I think something beautiful can be done in that property. I think it is a historic, pardon me, it was a historic piece of Lake Kempesca formed by the glacier on Lake Kempesca. The topography of Lake Kempesca has been compromised because of the work that they have done without first doing it in the proper sequences. I think if they had gone up there and looked at their property piece, they could have built a nice housing area and provided homes for several different people. But when you try to use up every piece of that property and jam is not the correct word, I'm looking for, but I don't think sometimes that when you put more on something, the quality is better. I think sometimes that the dignity of Stony Point has been lost. These people, I apologize. I don't want to call. These developers have not done a very good job about maintaining my property. I have numerous pictures to show that they do not stand by their word as often as they should. I have been, my property has been jeopardized numerous times because of lack of guidelines that have been given to them, and they have just done more than they should have. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Conda. Please state your name when you get up here.
I'm Lisa Johnson. I live at 848 South Lake Drive. My house is right there on R1. My first question to the board is, if you look at the last page of the agenda, which I only found out through, I signed up through the city text and email, that this meeting was even happening today. And number 3, notice shall also be given to all adjacent landowners, which would include myself and my husband. The road that is behind our house, our land goes all the way down there. I've seen all of this development happen without any of our knowledge. We had no idea this was happening. Landowners must be notified by certified mail of the applicant's request for a conditional use. I've had 0 certified mail since this project has begun. Why is that? I'm very curious about that.
I'll look into it here. I'm not the one that puts together the.
So to me, that would null and void this permit as of today.
Lisa, you said 848 South Lake?
Yes, so our house is on South Lake Drive, but our whole entire property goes all the way back to Prairie Hills Drive. I do have some pictures if you'd like to see. So that's our house and that's the road.
So the reason why is because we only send certified mailings out to properties within 250 feet of the application area.
But it says immediately across the street or road. That is us.
This, the property though that's being discussed here is, the specific parcel is not directly across the street.
Okay.
If I'm
This would be the
understanding
street.
correctly.
The red area that's pictured is a greater area than the applicant.
Okay.
It's the blue outline piece right there.
Okay.
Right. Now, yeah,
So I don't know if I can share these with you, but when they built, there's the large house there that's on the point that was built. You can
Put them in between these
Okay.
flags there, but I don't want to, when you're, cause see how it's shown there.
Yep. So this is our house, and this is the road that they're building. This is off their, we only knew about this from the Facebook page and the KXLG poster. We would have no idea what was going on. This is a view from our dining room window. There's the house on the point. All these trees are gone. They have taken out all of these trees. This is what it looked like when we first moved in. All those trees were there. There is a house now that is very close to this property. In fact, there's 2 properties for sale right now after this come out. This is definitely affecting our quality of life. This development happened without our knowledge, and now that I know we're not adjacent, it still affects our quality of life. We didn't have a courtesy from the developers who know where we live to even say, hey, we're doing this development right behind you. All of our back windows, when we built this house, were so we could see the lake. From every view, every window in our house, you can see the lake. Even from Sandy Shore, we can see Sandy Shore from the front portion of our house. We moved here in 2012 and decided to build here in 2013. We chose this spot as there wasn't an acreage for sale within a decent price and in the Watertown School District. We didn't want to be in town either, so we chose this because of the excellent compromise of country and city. Beautiful views, wildlife, and peace and quiet. We arguably have one of the best views of lake in the city. You can almost see the entire lake from the 3rd level of our house. This will be taken away from us when this is built. We used to not be able to see the house that was built on the point a few years ago, and now we can. Now what is it going to be? Looking at condos, a restaurant, a rooftop event, venue, swimming pool? I don't want to look at that. I want to look at the lake. We will never get this back. That's why we purchased land out here, for the views. What's going to happen to our resale value? There's currently 3 properties for sale in our subdivision, 2 within the last few months. We plan to build a garage right where the road begins at the bottom half of our lot. Now that if this goes through, we probably won't. I don't want loitering around my garage at night if this is a 24/7 venue. We never hear the patrons of the prop at all. We don't even realize the prop is down there. They're very quiet. The only time there's noise on the lake is the 4th of July when everybody comes out to shoot their fireworks, and I'm okay with that. For 1 day a year, 2 days a year, I'm not going to be okay with noise 200 plus days a year out there. I encourage you to vote this down. The developers have not spoken to the individuals in our subdivision that live in this area. They're not taking into consideration the people that live out here and want it to be nice and quiet and peaceful. That's why we moved out there. I am for the development of Watertown. New schools, we have a new rec center, we want to do a new ice arena, we have a new middle school, softball complex, soccer complex, we want to do a new football field, stores downtown, etc. Leave the lake for recreation purposes. I'm gonna echo what Conda said, put houses here, not a huge development that we don't need. This is not Okoboji, we should not act like it. This is a beautiful lake and we need to consider it and leave it alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. We've now heard from 2 opponents. I would ask for a proponent if there is one. Anybody else here to speak in favor of the motion? Please state your name when you get up here.
My name is Colt Ruch. I currently reside at 794 North Lake Drive, and I am definitely in support of a project like this. You know, I think Lake Kempesca is very, very beautiful. I enjoy spending a lot of time out there, and I think we need more assets like this project to attract, you know, not just the people living on the lake, but the people, you know, outside of just Watertown. This predominantly being an agricultural based and driven economy within Watertown, I think this would really spur more than just that. You know, it would be good to everybody, you know, and we talk about the new development, you know, new schools, a new rec center, you know, new ice arena. Well, we got to have a way to pay for that stuff. And if we're seeing more outside money come into this and spend their money here, you know, not just at this establishment, but everywhere around in Watertown. No, I think that would really, really help. Thank you.
I take comments from a proponent or opponent. Anyone here to speak for or against the motion? Please state your name for the record.
My name is Travis Cantwell. I live at 806 North Lake Drive. As a lake resident, I would like to see more amenities on Lake Kempesca, and I think this marina will provide a lot of benefits to the community of Watertown and to the residents of Lake Kempesca. Project like this would give people opportunity for maintenance-free living on the lake, something that we don't currently have. There's also an economic impact from tax revenues to job creation and added business for local restaurants, shops, tourism attractions, and everything else throughout the community. It also would provide residents in the city to have a place to store their boats on the water for easy access to the lake and let more people enjoy the lake than just the people that live on the lake. We have a 5,400 acre lake out there that, in my opinion, is greatly underutilized if you compare it to other lakes in the area that are substantially smaller and have a lot more going on, whether you want to look at Lake Madison, Ponset. All of those lakes have similar things: more restaurants, more attractions, more events. I think there's a lot of room for growth on Lake Kempesca. I know that change is hard, and there's going to be people in opposition, which we've seen tonight. But unfortunately, sometimes when you buy a piece of land and other land is purchased around it, you can't control that. And so keep that in mind as well. I know not everybody's in favor of it, and when it changes your landscape and what you see when you look out your window, that's difficult. But like I said, you can't always control the land that you own around you. There's farmland across the street from my house, and that could very easily be sold and developed someday too, and that's just a chance that I took when I bought that house, and something that you have to live with. So thank you.
I didn't know we were talking about boat storage in the marina.
Not at this point, but if you look at marinas in general, that is something that usually goes hand in hand with a marina. So.
And it's not a conditional use request.
I'm just saying, if you look up marinas in general, there's generally boat storage. So I'm not saying that there is or isn't going to be, but it's an option that could possibly happen with the marina, and I think it would also be a good thing.
The question here, I think, is do we bless this piece of ground for restaurants and condos? It isn't about the specifics of the building. It isn't about that. Do we think that this piece of ground is fit for that purpose? That's the question we have to answer here today. Do we have other proponents or opponents to the motion? Anybody else from the public that would like to speak in favor or against this? Please state your name.
Bob Drake. I just would like to clarify a couple things. We've tried to follow all the rules and regulations as far as DENR and everybody else is concerned with silt fences and otherwise. We have 3 approved grading permits basically that allowed for those, for putting the road to the south and doing that. And we've tried to follow all the rules. Whenever there was an issue or problem, we tried to address it right away. We also introduced this whole project out to North Shore, the name went. But we went out and kind of gave a feeling for the whole project. And we've given individual tours to people in the neighborhood that wanted to come up and look and do things. And we're sure willing to do that for anybody that wants to see what we're trying to do, you know, what we're trying to accomplish. So just to answer a few of those questions, that we're not trying to pull the wool over somebody's eyes or do something sneaky or underhanded or anything like that. So.
Okay, I see that you've started on the road and stuff that's going to go there. What is your completion date to have the pavement on that road?
Okay, that is a grading permit on that area. It's not actually a road. And until the city gives its blessing, it won't be a road.
So that's going to come through with the preliminary plan, and then after that, a plat and development agreement would come forth. And so then it would be 2 years after that development agreement would be approved by city council.
And it does allow us to take the big equipment through that area rather than going through Conda's place and disturbing her area. So, yeah, thank you.
Yep, and he does have 3 approved grading permits for that project.
Anyone else from the public for or against the application? Going once, going twice. I'll close the public hearing and look for motion on this.
Would you like to do discussion before we do a motion?
Motion, then discussion, and then we either vote it up or down.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the conditional use.
Motion by Brink. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Dargetts. With that, we'll have some discussion on the motion, any sort of proposed amendments, anything like that.
Can we make the amendment that if we do go along with this, that road from the south has to be completed? You know, for the access to it to meet everybody's and paved.
Yes. I agree that can be a condition, but and we already do have that in the development agreement. So when we bring the preliminary plan forward to the plan commission, then that will all have to be approved. And like I said, with the development agreement, but I don't think it's bad to just state that it'll comply with existing agreements and ordinance. And we would not give occupancy for a commercial building if that road wasn't completed. It would have to have city standard, to whatever standard was approved, it would have to be completed for them to be granted occupancy.
My main concern is that if they started building it before the road got done, all of that heavy traffic, the heavy equipment and stuff would just destroy what's there versus a few cars a day now.
Mm-hmm. Right, and so that's where but they couldn't even get a building permit until the street was installed.
Staff?
So, yes, Mr. Chairman, just to give a little bit of a background here to try to paint a picture on how this would proceed from this meeting. If this were approved as a conditional use, as Brandy's referenced, they would go through a preliminary planning process, and that preliminary plan is similar to other preliminary plans that have been brought before the Planning Commission for their review and approval, which includes things such as the public or private roadways, utilities, the lot layouts and configuration of, in this case, we'll probably see some detailed configuration of buildings on those lots. Once that preliminary plan is approved, there's then subsequent checkoffs before building permits can get issued, such as a commercial site plan. That's where we get into the high level of detail where we're reviewing the building plans, the actual structural plans, and the site plans as far as meeting off-street parking requirements, building setbacks from the lot lines, building height restrictions, any aesthetic regulations that may exist, and the zoning and subdivision regulations, screening, all those kind of requirements, fire code, all those kind of things get checked off then at that level. And then subsequent to that, the building permits could be issued, and then in this case for a roadway to access a commercial site, commercial/residential site, the way that would proceed is, generally speaking, is you would allow for the permit to build the road and the building at the same time. You would just hold back on the certificate of occupancy, install all the public infrastructure, meet city requirements, which would include the public access, public utilities to service that commercial site, and things of that nature. And the building official would generally hold off on that certificate of occupancy until all those criteria are met.
Okay, now another question is because of the shoreline is so valuable there and it's so high up, and we want to keep the aesthetics of the neighborhood as much as we could. Will that be part of their planning and stuff they do before the city approves it to make sure that they're going to start nightmare come true where dirt's falling into the lake and stuff? You know, that's going to be maintained. Is that going to be part of it? The city working with?
Yeah, absolutely. So any grading that would occur on that lot would be reviewed through that process as well. They have to show a detailed grading plan with that submittal of a commercial site plan, and any measures that need to be in place to protect from erosion or things of that nature. Just as with their grading permits, the developer, the contractor would be responsible and held accountable to those same conditions and terms.
I just want to see the lake protected as much as possible.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely. And to that point, I will mention that the developer briefly mentioned this, but to obtain their grading permits, for example, it went through some pretty strenuous checkoffs, not only at the city level, but at the state level as well, where Game Fish and Parks and the Corps of Engineers and DENR and then the city all chimed in on the review of those grading permits before they were issued. So there are the appropriate boxes that they had to check off in order to do the grading on that lot that's occurred now up to this point. And identical or similar processes of checks and balance will occur before any development work can happen as well.
Brandy, Matt, do we have any concerns about notice issues? I just want to address Ms. Johnson's concerns.
I guess Ken doesn't. So yeah, Ken and Jill administer those, and I can verify. I can look at the list, but it's typical. I mean, we per ordinance, or actually for the Board of Adjustment, it's by
State law.
Yeah, state law, where they have to notice within 250 feet of the adjacent properties.
Thank you. I don't want to make a mountain out of a
Discredit
molehill. I
that.
just want to make sure that we've addressed that concern.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of our, this property where she lives is clearly more than that threshold. It's part of our standard operating procedures, send those letters out, so I don't have any reason to assume that was not done.
And those notices aren't required when you're going to do a new road or something that was started like that? Not a road, but a permit for that? That's not required? Okay.
No, for a grading permit.
Heath, in terms of screening for something like that, or maybe this is a question for Brandy, what is ordinance required screening for a project like this?
Well, and you guys can implement higher standards with approving the conditional use. But as far as parking lots go and having the side yard buffers for green space, we do have that in ordinance. And for whatever they would propose in their commercial site plan, we would review that, because there are protections in there for if there's residential properties abutting commercial, that for the higher standard. So it would be completely up to you guys if you wanted to implement a higher standard. And I believe right now it's 5 feet on the side yard of green space.
5 feet between commercial and a residential lot?
For just the green yard buffer setback. But as far as the structure itself goes, there's, 20 feet for the side yard?
You'd be better off to implement that, though, when it comes back to you as a preliminary plan or something like that, so you can actually see where things are, where they're next to, and you can control it better. Now, we're just guessing.
Yeah.
They're not asking for a variance, they're gonna do everything according to the ordinance, and when they come back in with the preliminary plan, you got buildings and sites, and you can say, well, now we would like to see this happen.
If it would come back to this board, it would be that they were requesting a variance. Otherwise, they will meet all of the city ordinances and requirements.
And I believe, like has been mentioned, this has to come back before us with a preliminary plan. A lot of times when we do conditional uses, there isn't a preliminary plan that comes back. But when this property was zoned C2 a few years ago, that was one of the conditions. And that's why this one has that additional step of a preliminary plan. So it, so that this particular property is a little bit different than how most conditional uses get handled by us, because usually once a conditional use is acted upon by this board, it doesn't come back to us. But this one, per the development agreement or the rezoning or the rules of the rezoning, it will come back to us as it's kind of been alluded to already, but I just kind of reiterating that that's a requirement and it has to. It's not just words.
Right.
I do have a question for staff, maybe specifically for Matt. The city council recently changed the C2 commercial conditional uses to allow for apartments. But when the city council approves that, is there a referendum period before it becomes effective? And have we gone through that period? And I guess my ultimate question is, are we able to act on this today?
Well, I guess to answer your first question, yes, there's a referendum period. I would actually defer to Brandy as to what meeting that we approve that at.
Let me pull that up.
But yes, there's a 20-day referendum period from the date of publication after the ordinance is passed.
And I believe it passed city council at the January 21st meeting. So I'd imagine it was published on that Saturday, the 25th. And I could be wrong on my dates. These are just, I know it was on the 22nd was when the meeting was, but the publication date, I'm not 100% sure. But either if it was, that would put the 20 days referendum period. Is that what it is? Yeah, that would put us there. And that's what I'm just asking, if that is the case, should we be voting on this now, or should this be tabled until the ordinance is approved?
With that coming to light, if that's indeed true, there should not be action taken on this until the ordinance is, until the referendum period is passed. I shouldn't say, the board can take whatever action it likes. There would be a risk in approving that this evening, because that is not currently an ordinance until after the referendum period.
So could it be conditional to that not being referred? I believe we've done that in the past.
That shouldn't have even been brought to the board.
That's why I asked Jill that before this even started, and she said, yes, we can do it contingent on that. Obviously, she's not here tonight, but that's how it was explained to me by staff, and that's why we're at this meeting.
We've done things like that in the past. I don't see any reason why you couldn't make it contingent on the effectiveness of that ordinance. It's not ideal, but the board could certainly make that a part of their motion.
Is that the suggested course of action, council?
I can't.
In light of the situation?
Yes, in light of the situation, I think that that's prudent. I also, I can't guarantee that that wouldn't be challenged. And
So with it being, it's been approved and published, it's just not effective. We did act on other conditional uses, condition to a rezone. the campgrounds and the contractor shops. Annexation and zoning, even, it wasn't even in city limits.
Yeah, like I said, we do have a history of doing things like that. It'd be up to the board to make that decision.
We've got a motion in front of us, we've got a second in front of us. Is there any further discussion on that motion? I'm not gonna call for a vote yet because I'm gonna suggest 2 amendments to the motion, but do we have any further discussion as a motion on a whole? Seeing none, Commissioner Brink, would you accept a friendly amendment or perhaps consider amending your motion to include a contingency for the road approval, staff road approval? How do you want that worded, Counselor? Two conditions. Number one, condition on this south access road approval. And then contingent on the ordinance, the change in ordinance surviving the referendum period.
That seems appropriate, yes.
Okay. Yes, let me amend my motion. I amend my motion for approval based on road approval, which will come through the staff and through a preliminary plan. And the conditional use does not become effective until after the referendum period of, I believe it's resolution
2002.
2002. Thank you.
I would suggest that it's contingent on the ordinance change becoming effective. Just tweaking your language a little bit there, that the conditional use is contingent on the ordinance becoming effective. So let's play this out. Hypothetically, it gets referred and passes a referendum, then it would become effective after the passage of that vote in a far-fetched hypothetical scenario. Does that make sense?
I'll use those words, but can you say the words one
So
more time?
basically, the conditional use would be contingent on the effectiveness of the ordinance, adding apartments as a conditional use to the C2 zone.
Well, I will make an amendment to my motion for it to be contingent on the effectiveness of the resolution allowing apartments, as Matt stated, and also the road approved by staff and by preliminary plan.
Commissioner Brink has amended his initial motion. Do we have a second for that motion?
Second.
Any further discussion on the amendments? Please limit the discussion to the amendments.
I was just, looking at our duties of Board of Adjustment. There's this list of 1 through 8. The first 6, you kind of touched on with notices. We assume that those get handled basically by staff. That's the notices go out, and the public hearing is held. But then really what we dive into is number 7 on that list, A through H. We've talked about ingress and egress. Chip chimed in with that. We've talked about off-street parking. This property has a plan for parking underneath the building as well as additional parking. They have, this is more than 2 acres. They have more than enough room for parking. Refuge areas, which is shown on the plan. Utilities, that's been discussed. We've discussed screening. We've talked about how that's going to come back up at a preliminary plan. And so would signs and open yards. So I guess it all comes down to is in my opinion, is H is the general compatibility with adjacent properties. And if that's how we feel that this property fits and that's how this property is zoned. I know we've heard a couple people speak on that, they wish it was something like houses. The one thing with that is houses is not a permitted or conditional use based on what it is currently zoned. It is zoned C2. So then we're looking at, you know, what uses can that property be allowed to be that fit the character of the neighborhood is kind of my thought.
Any additional comments from board members regarding what bringing up specifically general compatibility with adjacent properties? I mean, strikes me, there's already a restaurant there, there's a commercial use, as Brink indicated, it's a C2 district, it's not even something that we're really allowed to do. Single-family residential, the C2 discussion just happened at the city council meeting. I didn't watch that, I'm not entirely sure how that went, but obviously it passed. So including apartments, condominiums in the C2 was obviously okay at that point. So I think it's far be it from us to say no to something like that, given that, I mean, that discussion has already happened in terms of compatibility. Any other discussion from board members?
Well, I think it's just worth repeating that change is hard, as it was stated from the audience. I agree. I don't, I do not, we have a gem of a lake, and I think that the developer needs to really look in the mirror hard and say, am I doing the best with this property? And he can, knowing that the neighbors feel the way they do, I think they just need to take that under advisement, and I trust that they will. They need to, for the community's sake. So we do put, basically our trust into them, that they're going to do the right job when they start this project. And again, it's going to come in front of us. So at that point, if we see something that we really don't feel comfortable with, we need to address it then. But at this point, we need to, untie their hands and let them see what they can come with.
With that, I'll take a roll call vote. Brandy?
Hanson,
Yes.
Brink,
Yes.
Oletsky,
Yes.
Colhane,
Yes.
Dargits Johnson.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Item number 3 is open public comment. If there was something that was not on the agenda that you'd like to address in front of this board, please come up now and speak your piece. Anybody? Old business, Brandy?
No, you guys, I don't usually run your Board of Adjustment, so I don't think I have anything to bring up.
Jill didn't tell you anything? All right,
No.
I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Dargat, second by Hanson. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Thank you all for being flexible too. Happy birthday, Rhonda.